There have definitely been some fantastic JRPGs in recent years, but I've got to be honest, there's something that just hasn't grabbed me in them. I think you can put it down to just one more very heroic hero joining forces with other very heroic heroes and saving the world. And while I've enjoyed the previous Trails games, it's definitely refreshing to finally have a hero who feels a little bit more realistic and who allows you to decide which areas you operate within. And I think it might be one of the best decisions Nihon Falcom have made since they created the series, injecting a real sense of personality, and for me personally, interest back into the series. But we are looking at the Nintendo Switch version, which may come with a few grey areas all of its own. Is it another heroic effort, or is it about to break your Switch's day? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, and a cheers to the publisher for the review copy. Now let's find out. First things first, you do not need to have played any of the other games in the series. However, there is a backstory and timeline section of the menu so that you can see where exactly this one slots in. And while a previous knowledge of the factions involved may prove helpful for some personal context, I really don't think it's going to be a hindrance for new players to take on this storyline. You play as Van Arkwright. He is what's known as a Spriggan within the Calvard Republic. While you could class these as freelancers, they're more like freelance detectives, and they're more than happy to take on jobs that skirt the line of legality. In fact, that plays massively into the game's systems, as we'll find out. The prologue sees Van hired by a young student to find a missing family heirloom. During this time, you're introduced to many of the game's systems, including the way it handles side quests. They're essentially case files that you can take on, and they're quite interesting. Things like an employee who stole some money from a till, but who has no previous history of doing such things, and the way it unfolds is really quite cool. All the way through to more mundane and classic JRPG tasks like trying to find a missing cat. Refreshingly, the storyline follows this path, with Van being a very likeable character. He's not entirely new, and what I mean by that is we've kind of seen variations of his persona in many other games, but they have nailed the nuance. He skirts the line nicely between arrogant and likeable.
To be really good.
This is Andalusia's late summer limited time edition. The specially made tart covered in Violette de Soleil figs from Oregon honey.
Thankfully, the gameplay's also seen a number of changes, which really do inject some interest into it. First, you can navigate around the city map area. You can fast travel to any of the areas you've visited, and it'll also show you where your current and active quests are. So far, so straightforward. Although he's kind of a detective, you're usually following some kind of marker to lead you to the next story or plot point. There are also dungeons that you'll go into that have an area for you to refresh, rest up your character, and also cook, if you so choose, and manage your party. Now, you will find many different party members. You can switch between any of those, and the experience is managed through your Zypher, which is essentially a mobile phone. Weapons can be upgraded. Reminded me a little of Final Fantasy VII's materia system. Here you've got quartz that you can slot into your character on a number of different levels. They'll improve things like your HP or your attack, and you can customize moves, special abilities, and of course upgrade your weapons. Now, I've mentioned the mapping system. You can fast travel anywhere, including to various locations within a dungeon, so you don't have to backtrack. A nice little touch. And it goes without saying that your adventure is going to take you much further afield than just the city. So then on to what I think is the best thing about this game. That is the combat. Now, it's taken however many years it's been since the very first JRPG, for a developer to go, I know what would be a good idea. You know action RPGs? And everyone's like, yes. And you know turn-based RPGs? They say the same thing. And that person says, why don't we make it so that you can do both whenever you want? Now, I don't know if that's something that's happened previously, but it's certainly not something that this series has seen, and it's excellent. What it means is that you can run into combat, hack and slash your way through enemies, dodge roll in out of the way, locking on easily, and performing more powerful attacks, but at any moment, you can use what are known as shards to initiate turn-based combat. Even that's seen some refinement. Previously you had a grid-based system, now you can move wherever you want to position yourself either behind an enemy or out of the line of fire, or close to a companion that will create a synergy between them and potentially do more damage. When you're in the turn-based combat, you can perform different arts and crafts. No, they don't all bust out the pens and paper. They're different magical moves, either offensive or defensive, with some monsters being particularly weak to certain magic types, but also they create a link between the real-time action combat and the turn-based combat by having some of the moves that you perform in turn-based more effective if you've stunned the enemy in that hack and slash area. Also worth noting is you can't just hack and slash your way through everyone, because some enemies will be almost invulnerable to physical attacks. You've also got the S-Craft gauge, which can be further built up outside of turn-based combat, and then used within that to add potency to the moves you perform by pressing the L button. And then by repeatedly damaging the enemy and filling up the S-Craft gauge, you can unleash some massive S-Craft skills. Essentially limit breaks. They can also be skipped if you get a little bored of them, but they do look great and those systems tie brilliantly together. There's of course quite a bit of nuance. Little things like if you're in the hack and slash section and you take too much damage, rather than just dying, it will knock you into the turn-based but at a disadvantage. They really have thought through carefully. You've got the turn order at the top of the screen as well, and even that can be manipulated by using certain special, more quick moves. All of this is to say that the combat is outstanding. It's so nice to have something that feels fresh within the genre, and it's a direction that I hope more RPGs go in. The detective work carries with it its own rank, meaning that the decisions you make can push you in a number of different directions. You can be more lawful, more grey, and initially I thought this was just an arbitrary choice, but it turns out it directly feeds into the game. Again, without spoiling, it means some big changes to the route that you might take. And they're not small choices either, letting you determine the fate of a lot of the people that you work for or with. There are some minor relationship mechanics in here that will give you certain rewards if you gift items, and as far as controls go, things are spot on. While there's nothing particularly standout, there are a few nice options to tweak things. You can change the XY axis, sensitivities, and those can be independent, but by default everything's mapped out really well. The only thing I think I would add is an option to quick save. It really isn't a big deal, the game saves often and you can quickly save by navigating through the menus. I guess you know things are pretty good when that's one of the biggest weaknesses. I can level at it. I give story and gameplay combined 19 out of 20. Controls score 18 out of 20. Visually, this is the biggest change from any other version of the game. Now, Nihon Falcom, I believe, have developed a brand new engine for this iteration. On other platforms, that means that it looks a lot better with crisper textures and running silky smooth. On the Nintendo Switch, well, we've got 30 FPS most of the time, but there are quite a few occasions where that can drop down, especially in some of the latter areas. I don't think it ever reached the point where it was bad, and I found that within combat, it seems to focus its resources on what's going on directly in that area, allowing it to mostly maintain 30, but it is a bit disappointing, because it's not just the performance. Texture quality on Switch is really quite low. I also saw some texture misalignment on the ground, a real shame. Now, if you can get past the slightly dated visual, it does and can look quite nice at times, and there is one real boon here. That's that there's no load-in between interior and exterior locations. If you're running around the town and you want to run into a shop, the doors open and in you go. Now, yes, there's still load-in between the larger areas, but it saves a bunch of time and just feels so much more natural than we usually see. In handheld, it plays just fine, again with the same drops, but with that smaller screen, the resolution, it just looks a little nicer, and this is where I've enjoyed playing it the most. As for audio, well, the soundtrack is in line with the series. There are some excellent songs, but others that are a little bit generic and forgettable. With that said, there are some very good sound effects, particularly within combat, and I enjoyed the voice acting. I spoke about Van as a character. His voice is perfect for him. Across the board, the dub is quite strong, and you can use Japanese voices if you so choose. I give visuals and performance on the Switch version 14 out of 20. Sound and audio scores 17 out of 20. When it comes to value, as you can see from the 19 and 18 for gameplay and controls, I love this as a JRPG. It ticks so many boxes that I haven't seen ticked in a long time, and what else it does is offer replayability that's worth doing through a New Game Plus mode so that you can experience those different choices. Now without any of that, you're still looking at an RPG that you could push to 80 to 100 hours. That is a heck of a lot of content, and value only really takes a hit on Switch for the slightly poor presentation. Value scores 18 out of 20.
There I was, thinking Almada had no presence here in this city. What fun!
Trails Through Daybreak is an excellent JRPG. It's got interesting characters, an enjoyable storyline with lots of different choices, and had the performance been perfect, this would be an easy 90%. As it is right now, it gets a SwitchUp score of 86%. Still, definitely worth picking up or checking out. A game that I've really enjoyed, but you can almost guarantee this will be featuring in an all patched up episode at some point down the line. Thanks to our Patreons and members, all of you that enjoy the content. I hope this is of some use to you. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!